My one-man mission of hooting and hollering about Colorado joining the Big 12, well, it's not hooting and hollering anymore. It's real. So who better than to bring on somebody that's kind of familiar with the situation onto the show? Here we go.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. Of course, you know we're available on every single podcasting platform, as well as visually. If you want to see the majestic beard on YouTube, you can do so. Also, follow me on Twitter at AllDayOState. All right, it's pretty simplistic. The time has finally arrived. There's no more hooting and hollering necessary. There's no more pandering as to what might happen or what will happen or what could happen. There's more that'll grow legs from this, but let's focus on the right here, right now, which is Colorado. So everybody help me welcome on the show today as we do this crossover with Locked On Buffs. Kevin Borba, how are we doing today, brother man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's been some time coming. All right. We reached back. I was trying to make sure Kevin, his first crossover experience was with the bearded, majestic wonder here. But it was what it was. So people got to him first. That's because he was a hot commodity. I don't blame them. But we had conversations, a while back in regards to this being an inevitability. And when it does happen, obviously I wanted to hit the ground running with you. And I know you had a little bit of reservations in regards to if it was going to happen, especially as quickly as my crazy timeline was putting out there. But now that it is here, A, what does it feel like to be back home? And B, does this change the perception of Colorado, even from a recruiting realm, if it couldn't even get better than it has already?
Yeah, the feelings are very mixed. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, there was questions as to would it happen. I think Colorado kind of made it clear that it would happen if they felt it was necessary. And clearly, after last week's Pac-12 Media Day, day before meeting, when they didn't get any numbers, it kind of became apparent, and it helped that the Big 12 gave a deadline. Kind of became apparent that it was necessary. Realistically, I said this all along on my show. I caught a lot of flack for it. I said Colorado will not go to the Big 12 unless they feel it's the right move. And it was the right move. I think people wanted me to say either or, and I was not comfortable saying either or because I didn't want to put that out there. So I feel like it makes sense for Colorado. They get the guaranteed money. They get a chance to return to where they had more success. They had, I'm going to call it 1.5 seasons above 500 in the Pac-12, the half being the COVID year. So not a lot of success to be had in the Pac-12. They never really fit, it felt like. But in terms of the Pac-12 itself, I always have a soft spot in my heart for the Pac-12. That was my first job out of college. During the pandemic, got a job as a production assistant at the Pac-12 network. So me personally, I'll always have a soft spot, and I hope the Pac-12 can figure something out. But for Colorado, it's a great move. Gets them into Texas, gets them into Florida. And those are the two states that Coach Prime has always talked about recruiting. Obviously, he's already had success, but I think being able to sell to recruits, hey, you're from Dallas, we're going to play 2 games in Texas this year. Or, hey, You're from Orlando, we play the Knights this year. Or you're going to play them twice in your career if you're here for 3 or 4 years. So they offer a lot. It offers a lot. And then stability, which is, I think, the name of the game.
That's it, man. And that was what I was always kind of narrowing it down to. The minute you noticed that the Pac-12 was pushing the goalpost. Oh, we're going to get these numbers. Like, there's nothing in life. There's not a job in the world where if you're not proud of something, you're going to be pumping it all out there, right? So to me, it felt like an inevitability because the landscape's not going to change. I would say if you even reach back and think of the conversations that Greg Sankey was having about, the NCAA not being a necessity exactly. And he doesn't really care what happens with the playoff because at the end of the day, it's gonna kind of narrow itself down anyways. I think those were all indications that maybe it won't be a 2 mega conference thing, but top 65, top 60-ish. That's always a possibility.
It always is. And I think college football is headed in a it always has been, but it's headed into a money motivated direction. So conferences that make the most money are the conferences that are going to survive. Going back to the Pac-12, for instance, if you notice the schools that are always giving the statements, it's typically Oregon State. It's typically Washington State. Unfortunately for them, I feel bad for them. I really do.
Right. Yeah.
But those are often the schools that are left out of these expansion discussions. Those are often the schools where it's like, okay, Colorado, Arizona, so-and-so is going to the Big 12, Stanford, Cal, Oregon, Washington to the Big 10. This is just hypothetically.
Right.
And then it's like Oregon State, Washington State, maybe the Mountain West wants them. And it's like everybody wants to be in a Power 5 conference. It's kind of crazy to me that all of this is happening as the playoff is about to expand. And it feels like this would be the perfect time to have 5 power conferences, because if you're in a conference and you win your conference, you go to the playoff. That's what they're preaching. And so very interesting that that's the direction we're headed in, but money motivates everything. And we'll continue to see that as things go on.
Well, and speaking of money, let's go ahead and touch on that a little bit, right? And this is for people, I'm sure it's been slightly annoying seeing some Pac-12 fans be like, oh, congrats, you got the worst team in the Pac-12. Like, come on, man. It's not even about that. And speaking of, I'm gonna show my age here. You young whippersnappers out there, understand the affinity for the Pac-12. I'm the opposite. I grew up as a kid watching Colorado in the Big 12. I grew up idolizing what Kordell Stewart was able to do on the field, and just what they had built. They had, I think his name was David Bloom, an Olympic skier that was also a returner, and he caught the Big 12 by storm. And that, to me, I don't know, man, the nostalgia side of it, I think, is important, because Colorado used to be very, very good. Matter of fact, growing up, you could pretty much pencil in that as a loss. It just, Colorado used to be that squad. And part of it was recruiting Texas. And now, Coach Primetime, you know what I mean? You already alluded to it a little bit. This is his cup of tea.
Yeah, I think Texas offers a lot for him. They have a lot of history in the Big 12. I think the only connection or kind of tie I make with Colorado in the Pac-12 is one of my good buddies that I graduated high school with played at Colorado. That was kind of like the only lasting memory I have of Colorado. They were the opposite in the Pac-12, where you said in the Big 12, you play Colorado, that's a loss. And the Pac-12, everybody's like, okay, we're playing Colorado, this is a win. Except for that one year where it was glorious and they won 10 games. But other than that, they just never really found their fit. It was kind of like transferring to a new school and not really finding your clique, if you will. It's like, we go to the school, yes, but we never found our group. We were never with the baseball team. We were never with the football team, or like the nerds, or whatever it is. But yeah, Texas, he's very familiar with Texas. You mentioned it. Coach Prime played for the Cowboys. He raised his kids in Texas. He coached at Trinity, which I believe is in the Dallas area somewhere, coached in that TAPS high school league. So he's very familiar with Texas, has a lot of ties. And like I said, I think having more reasons or excuses to be in Texas is, it's a good problem to have. I think Texas is one of my 4 states in the United States, including California, Georgia, and Florida, where if you just built a team full of players from that school, there's a good chance you'll win. And so having more access to those guys can only help.
And real quick, before we jump into the next segment, what are some of the numbers about like jerseys being sold since Deon's been the coach or something like that?
Yeah, so everything has changed since he went there. I went out to Boulder for the spring game, and it's like literally Coach Prime merch everywhere. You would have thought I was at the Georgia spring game, like back-to-back national champions. That's what it felt like. But 700% increase in merch sales, over 700% growth in Instagram followers. They sold out the spring game, obviously, which it was snowing. So for a California guy like me who doesn't like the snow, I was surprised to see as many people out there in the snow. I respect it. It was the only spring game to be on ESPN. They've already sold out 2 home games this year, which hasn't happened this early since 2019. And they also were unanimously voted to join the Big 12. And I don't want to speculate because I'm not trying to take away from the move, but does this move happen this quickly and as emphatically if Coach Prime's not the coach? I don't know. I don't know.
Bro. Come on, man.
I don't want to say it, but you said it for me.
Numbers matter.
Yes,
numbers matter. And in this, like you had mentioned, right, the financial side of things is going to get more and more and more important, whether we like it, love it, hate it. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. And if somebody moves the needle, like Coach Primetime does, that's good for the conference, right? Yeah. That's good for eyeballs eyeballs equal money, money equals investment equals better recruiting, right? It's the trickle down effect, and it has to start with football. I think people are starting to realize that more and more, just like people typically realize whenever you're in the hiring market, there's not anything out there better than LinkedIn. Guys, right now it's a crapshoot in the hiring world because society's kind of crazy, right? We're all dispositioned to feel one way or the other about the job market. So if you are looking to hire people, LinkedIn Jobs is the best out there for you and your small business, which is why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1. I know you had a personal experience with LinkedIn right out of college. Yeah,
I did. That's how I got my job at the Pac-12 network. I was able to connect with the hiring manager and everything.
And look at us now, man. We're continuing the climb. So do yourself a favor. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege right now. If you are feeling the effects of what it's like to hire somebody in this new age market, give yourself the best opportunity. And that is with linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go there now to get your business squared away with the best hires at the best times for free. All righty, y'all. So now we get to come into some of the expectations for Colorado this season before we circle the wagons back to some of the expansion conversation, because lay of the land, I doubt this changes what people's perception is on this season, because just like OU saw last year, it doesn't matter how good your staff is. If you have to replace 40, 50 dudes, even if it's an absolute necessity, it still takes time. It takes time to get it all figured out. So for those people out there saying, Colorado could potentially beat USC early on, I'm not a big buyer in USC, but I don't think that's going to happen, because I think it's at least going to take Colorado to the back half of the season before they understand exactly what they have and what they really need to work on. So what is the expectation for Colorado this season?
If you're asking a Colorado fan, it's a natty. They're going to be hosting the parade.
No, don't, hold on. Don't come in pulling Texas malarkey right away now. Calm down.
Sorry. Here's the thing. I think Colorado, there's a lot of excitement, as there should be. But let's kind of just break down the roster. They brought in 51 transfers. They brought in, I think it's 22-ish recruits / JUCO guys. So that's a lot of moving pieces. A lot of these guys, for every guy that has good experience, like Alton McCaskill from Houston, or say Travis Hunter, there's guys who haven't played yet. There's guys who went to Tennessee and were backups. There were guys who went to Florida State and were kind of the guy off the bench that would come in, but wasn't the starter. And so they have a lot of experience. They also have a lot of inexperience. So I personally think when people ask me for the win total, I would say the ceiling is 6. That's a bowl game. That's a success in my eyes. I think anything over 3-4 wins, I think 5 wins would be cool as well. You just have to look at the landscape. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of tension between the Big 12 and the Pac-12 right now, but I think we just got to be realistic and look at the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. They have a Pac-12 champion, back-to-back champion in Utah, who is also returning their quarterback. They have a lot of talent. The Pac-12 is as deep as it's ever been, at least in my lifetime, and it's going to be a battle. And realistically, Colorado has to play just about all of the top teams, which is not going to be easy. They do get to play Stanford. They do get to play Arizona and schools that are going to be towards the bottom, but got to take advantage of those wins. And so I would say 6 is my comfortable ceiling. That I don't want to put any more expectations other than that.
How dare you be reasonable, sir?
Sorry.
Now, is there going to be more of a barometer put on, I don't know, how the progression on the season is? Like, okay, let me put it to you this way. Is it possible that you only win 4 games, but by the latter half of the season, you see such a drastic improvement that everybody's still pretty daggone comfortable with the way things are moving forward?
See, the problem is, I think realistically, people are going to start to, as soon as Colorado loses, I'll just put it this way. As soon as Colorado loses to, say, TCU, USC, whoever it is, people are going to jump on them. They're easily the biggest target in college football right now because they're so flashy, if you will. And so I don't really know if there's going to be like room for progress, or like people are going to be like understanding of what the situation was heading into the season. It kind of reminds me, I have past experience covering Texas, and I'm not saying that they're a brand like Texas, but they remind me of Texas, where everyone wants to beat them, everyone wants to make fun of beating them, and everyone wants to see them lose. And so that's kind of what Colorado, you get it. Don't act like you don't.
I'm tracking.
So everybody wants to do that to Colorado is kind of the feeling that I'm going to get. And so I don't know. I think the only people who the progress matters to is recruits, transfers, and kind of the staff itself, because the outside noise is going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I could see them sneaking up and biting somebody that they shouldn't, right?
Yep.
Because I don't know, man. There has to be a lot to be said about preparation, and I don't think people understand. Deon Sanders excels in that department, right? So preparation is one thing that Colorado will be. Do they have the two deep and the experience to compete for 4 quarters against some teams? Probably not. But they're going to be able to catch, some lightning in a bottle occasionally, and they're going to be a problem for some of these teams. I know you mentioned the quarterbacks in the conference, and I know you'd mentioned that it might have some more depth than, traditionally speaking. But yeah, man, preparation's a big deal. And sometimes teams will underlook Colorado. So I feel like right now it's a safe bet. At some point in time in the year, you're going to be double digit underdogs and win a game. You might lose a game that you probably shouldn't too. I think those are both possibilities.
Yeah, I will say the preparation factor is huge. I think a lot of people, they look at Colorado and they only see Deon Sanders, they only see Coach Prime, but you look at his staff, there's a handful of guys that were head coaches. His offensive coordinator literally quit a head coaching job to take this offensive coordinating job. He's got guys from the Nick Saban tree, and so he knows what it takes to prepare. Coach Prime is a very smart football mind, probably top 10 football player ever. So he knows what it takes to be a good, successful person. I think the preparation is going to be huge for Colorado. I think they will have to out-scheme people. There's going to be, to compete with a team like, say, USC, for example, because we've kind of been talking about them. USC is my favorite to win the Pac-12 right now. I was asked on a radio show the other day, they're like, who should be the top team in the Pac-12 in the preseason? I was like, obviously USC. Is it disrespectful to Utah? Obviously it is. But USC had both of those games won. It was their defense. Shout out Lincoln Riley and his successful defenses that have been so historic over the years. It's USC's league to win. And so I think you have to kind of out prepare them. You kind of have to plan for certain things. You have to know that your back's going to be up against the wall and it's going to be difficult, but I think everybody in Boulder knows what they signed up for. And so that's the interesting part to me. So
we understand the excitement level that follows Deon. We understand that there's clearly going to be a little bit of a new time in, the Colorado mystique, but I do think this is going to be very, very good for them. I do think that they are going to jump up and bite somebody this year just because of underestimation and the pageantry and whatever. And from what I know, I live here in the Springs, and it's funny when people were circulating that Colorado doesn't want to. Well, I've heard some of the border regions type of those people have said we're too good for the Big 12. Okay, that's fine. But from a fan base perspective, everyone seems pretty fired up here in the state of Colorado. Are you sensing that all across the board?
Yeah, I think from different perspectives brings different opinions. And so the fans, I think we're prisoners of the moment. And so sometimes we look at the struggles that the Pac-12 is having and we're like, the Pac-12, why would we want to be there? They're struggling. But you look at where I think I had Adam from 24/7 Sports who covers Colorado on my show yesterday. And we were talking about what Colorado's fit was in the Big 12. And he's like, a lot of their alumni is from California. A lot of their current students are from the Pac-12 footprint, A lot of their current students are from the Pac-12 footprint. And so I think from the fans' overall perspective, they look at the Pac-12 as a conference and they're like, they're struggling. But Colorado-wise kind of fits into the Pac-12 more than people realize. I just think we're prisoners of the moment. And right now, the moment is not helping out the Pac-12. So there's reasons to be excited for the Big 12. The Big 12, you're getting money. They're innovative. There's a surprise performance coming up at the Big 12 championship, if I remember correctly. Some people were pushing for Beyonce, some for Taylor Swift. I don't know who it's going to be. I promise you that. But I know the Big 12 is innovative. They're bringing a lot of new attention. And so I think that's the exciting part. I just think that oftentimes we get a little too caught up with the now and don't consider everything else. So it's a good move. I think if the Pac-12 would have worked things out, we'll call a spade a spade. I think Colorado stays in the Pac-12 if they were able to get numbers and do everything correctly. But that's not how the cards were dealt. And so kind of you got to take advantage of what the situation you're in.
I love it, man. I really do. Okay, so now that we understand that, now let's shift gears back to, we know Colorado's in. We're ready to rock and roll. Love it.
Yep.
I love every minute of it. But
Mhm.
I think naturally the Four Corners was being thrown around a long time. Arizona has already kind of crossed this bridge, or at least they've tippy-toed into the same exact water. So I think they're a natural to come. But for as much shade as I want to throw at Utah, because their fan base is just absolutely ridiculous, Oregon's fan base is worse. They are worse. I'll say, you can't say it, okay, but I can say it. Oregon's fan base is a bunch of crazy wahoos that don't know from their A side from a hole in the head at times. But it looks like instead of us even having a conversation about Utah, it might be Oregon. Like, I cannot believe that I'm having this conversation, but I get it. Okay. I'm an O State purist, but I love the Big 12, right? This has been my whole life. Swear to you, when I was a little kid, to get snacks and treats and stuff, my dad, I had to recite all of the Big 12 and all of the cities that they came from for me to get ice cream and stuff. I promise you. So
there you go.
As a little bitty kid, man, I was always researching the Big 12 and the Big 8 even.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, man, the connecting dots for some of us is going to be amazing. And again, Colorado was really successful because of the recruiting. That was it. Like, I understand that the Pac-12 feels like, Colorado's a fit, and Colorado fans feel that the Pac-12 is fit. But let's talk about people in the Pac-12 want to bring up research quite often. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hasn't Colorado lost like $70 million in research money compared to what they would have had if they'd stayed in the Big 12?
I'm not a big academia guy. I just know sometimes you got to spend money to try to research things. It happens to the best of us. Sometimes you got to put a little money out there to get the research going. But yeah, I think the thing about Oregon, I wanted to touch on that point, the fan base thing. I think the hard part for a lot of Pac-12, Big 12 fans is realizing the value that each other bring. And so, for example, the Big 12 fans despise Oregon, totally get it. But realistically, Oregon is probably the biggest brand out there right now that's quote unquote available. I think that's kind of my key to the Pac-12 success. I wrote an article about it for my Stanford site because I cover Stanford as well. And I was like, if the Pac-12 keeps Oregon and they say they lose Arizona, for example, not ideal. You would hate to lose another school. I'm not trying to diminish the losses of Arizona and Colorado, but excuse me, you keep Oregon. That's a marquee brand. That's a huge brand to build off of. I said the same thing, and I'll say it again. I'm not trying to throw shade at the Big 12, but if Oregon comes to the Big 12, they are automatically the biggest brand in the Big 12.
Absolutely.
They have that Uncle Phil money. They got that Phil Knight Nike money, and like that's what it comes down to. And I'm sorry that Big 12 fans get so upset by that. But it's true. Shirt
it's just the pretentious, sanctimonious way in which they kind of act a little bit. But I saw some Oregon fans saying, if we end up in the poverty Big 12 and be so mad, it's like, hey, man, it's reciprocal. All right. We're not a big fan of having Oregon fans, but we get it. If Brett Yormark can pull off Oregon, build the man a statue. Do it.
I know. Build a man a statue. I wrote about it just yesterday. If you guys want to go check out a fun stroll down memory lane. I wrote an article talking about the Big 12 or the Pac-12 and the position they were in 2011 and then 2021. If you guys, I'm old enough to remember, which I was 12 at the time, so barely old enough. Texas and Oklahoma wanted to go to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 decided not to invite them. Flash forward to 2021, Oklahoma State was actually one of the teams that wanted to go to the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 turned down them, and I want to say 3 other schools. We'll call it.
I know. Us and Texas Tech were at least under consideration, but that's all as far as it got.
So the Pac-12 was like, no, we're fine, and all of a sudden the Pac-12 finds himself with 9 teams. It's still salvageable. I think there's a big narrative that it's not salvageable, but realistically, I don't know if the Big 12 is going to take in 4 teams. I think the one spot kind of feels right. I think they're going to be at 14 or whatever that number is. They're going to bring in one more school, would be my guess. And then that kind of leaves the Pac-12 to survive by default. So it'll be interesting because a lot could happen. I think Arizona, kind of like you said earlier, is the perfect fit. They've already flirted with the idea. So whether they commit or not is up to them.
You know what, Kevin? That is such an admirable statement. You are such a nice guy. I think the Pac-12 is about as salvageable as the Titanic is resurrectable. That's just my personal opinion. All
Hey,
right,
it could happen though.
it,
They
it
got
could
they
it
got a whole
could
network
happen.
ready to go. They have a whole network. They have some teams. Don't know how many. They have some. I think a lot of people too are looking at this. Is just my Pac-12 tangent that I've been saying. I like to play devil's advocate a lot. People hate it, but it's hilarious to me. If you think about expansion outside of Colorado, the Big 12 add a group of 5 teams. That's what the Pac-12 could do. They could add San Diego State, SMU, Colorado State to kind of try to get the Denver market back. It's not the same. I know all the Colorado fans need to chill. I know it's not the same, but it's there. And then they could add someone else, UNLV, Tulane, whoever it may be, and they could kind of salvage themselves. Is that ideal? No, I never said it was ideal. I just said it's possible.
But man, they're running out of time. I really feel like if they would have made a decision, like people want to throw a lot of shade at our former commissioner, as they should, because he was not very forthcoming in the thinking of marketing. He didn't get it, right? He didn't get it. It is what it is. But the one thing he did do was Bob Bowlesby was able to say, okay, this sucks, but let's bring these 4 in immediately. And fresh off of Cincinnati being in the Final Four, I know they lost Luke Fickell, which obviously takes some of the steam out of the engine. But nonetheless, the one good thing he did do for certain was bring those 4 in immediately. So he at least stopped the bleeding. And he allowed Brett Yormark to kind of roll into this. All right, it is new. It is fresh, young, hip, right? It's something. Instead of doing that, George Kliavkoff either ran his mouth as much as possible or he hid in a hole, right? Yeah. And then he decides to pop up. Yeah. And this is what he comes out with, which we're not going to talk about it. Well, what? Dude, you knew everybody and their mom was there to hear you say one group of something, of just something, even Colorado. And there's other ADs, there's other presidents, there's other chancellors that are like, please say something good, man. Come on.
At least lie, Sometimes you got to politic your way through it. I've been like, I would have lied.
If you ain't cheating or if you ain't lying, you ain't trying. Something like that.
Whatever works, I think, I don't know. One thing we can say about the Pac-12 is they're admirable for sticking to their word, regardless of where it took them, because they've stuck to their word the entire year. Whether that's the move or not, I would say not, but they said
media sound like Amber Heard's lawyer right now, buddy.
Media rights deal first, expansion second. And I was always calling for expansion first, media rights deal second. That made more sense to me. Big 12 obviously was kind of laid out the blueprint right there. I don't know. Sometimes we all do things differently. Some people put on their left shoe first. I think the Pac-12 puts on their shoes after their pants or something, or their pants after their shoes is what it feels like. It's just confusing, but it's not my job. Now, it's not my problem, I guess.
Before I let you skedaddle on out of here, I got one more question for you. All right. We're going to hop to the other side of the country. Okay. Does this, right, with Oregon having conversations, Utah having conversations, Arizona having conversations, I don't know. I haven't heard whether Arizona State is or isn't. I have no clue. But a lot of Pac-12 schools are at least having this conversation now. Does this rub out UConn?
No, I think UConn is kind of, from what I was being told today, Arizona is like the next up. So they're on deck. UConn's in the hole. So if Arizona doesn't decide, it's UConn's spot to take. And
cool,
I don't think that's the sexiest thing for Big 12 fans, because they want to keep. Can't blame them. I guess Big 12, fellow Big 12 members. They want to take in another Power 5 school. But UConn is kind of they're in the hole. So they're next. They're kind of the next team after the next team, and so. Good position for them to be in, and it's up to Arizona to kind of make the last domino fall.
I think it is a good position. I think it would be smart. It would behoove UConn to do so. They need to ride the national title wave. They are a basketball school in the best basketball conference if they do choose to make that move. And from a football perspective, let's face it, right? As some more news is about to head down the pipeline, the ACC is not in a very good spot. So the ACC's foundation could be shaken and stirred pretty quickly, which means that if UConn, of all of the teams on the East Coast, if UConn has a seat at the guaranteed P5 table in the middle of nothing. I mean, other than Morgantown, West Virginia, and maybe, you know, some Penn fans, Penn State, maybe, like, you're going to be able to capitalize on that. UConn would be able to use that as leverage in recruiting in an area that does have some dudes.
Yeah, UConn is shout out to Connecticut. I lived a year there. That's where I did my grad
there you
school.
go. Okay, all right.
Shout out to Connecticut. Shout out Frank Pepe's Pizza. Yeah, UConn has a prime opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say fail up, but they kind of have.
That's good.
Outside of basketball, football-wise, they're improving. I'll say they're improving under Jim Moore. I love what they're doing.
You got a real coach, yeah.
Yeah, but they have a prime opportunity to be a Power 5 team after kind of being as irrelevant as it gets for, I want to say, I don't know. I don't remember a good UConn team of my lifetime. Like, genuinely, I don't. There could be one. I don't remember it for football-wise. Basketball, I know they're always there. Got Shabazz Napier, Kemba Walker, and all those guys. But this is a perfect opportunity for them. If I'm UConn, I'm kind of hoping and praying that for some reason Arizona's feeling loyal to the Pac-12. Like, I'm praying that maybe George shoots a little, you know what, we got it this time. That was my bad last week. We got it this time. If I'm UConn, I'm like, Arizona, please stay so we could go.
I like it, man. All right, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And before we skedaddle on off of here, buddy, make sure that you do give yourself a harmless, shameless little plug here and let the fine people know out there how they can find you, buddy.
Yeah, you can find me at Kevin_Borba. I cover Colorado, Stanford, and the entire Pac-12 for Athlon and Fan Nation. You can follow me at Locked On Buffs as well. I'm making content everywhere, so make sure to find me and make sure to let me know how right I am. Most of the time, people don't seem to agree, but I know I'm always right. So
there you go. Well, you know, I tell people all the time, I was wrong once back in '97, so I'm okay. I'm okay if people fire back at me occasionally. All right, brother, man. Welcome back to the Big 12, and thank you very much for coming on the program today. I greatly appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. All right, so I'm gonna let you go off and do what you need to do.
Thank you.
But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna wrap it up pretty much for this one. I've been hooting and hollering about it. I'm excited that it's finally here. I think it's great for Colorado to be in the Big 12. I think it's great for the Big 12, and I think it's great for Oklahoma State in and of itself because more eyeballs, more money, more opportunities. And who doesn't want to see Coach Primetime put his cowboy hat on when he comes to Stillwater, Oklahoma? I do. I'm guilty. Sign me up. All righty, y'all. You know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. And thank you very much for tuning in because we know there's so many other places you could be, but making this your first listen is very important. Thank you. I appreciate you. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.